Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. December 17th, 2020, and this is episode 21 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. I've got some great stuff for you lined up later on. I'm going to be talking about why and how you should do some flipped classroom stuff, especially in a virtual teaching situation. A lot of us are being kind of pushed into that, but there are a lot of benefits to doing a flipped class, so I'm going to be talking about that later on. But first, we're going to take a look at some news and updates. I've got a ton of news and updates for you today. So first of all, Formative has a lot of updates for December. If you don't know what Formative is, it is just an easy way to get formative assessments from your students. So some new things that they're adding. One, you can move formatives without having to go back to the dashboard. So if you're in one of those assessments, you can put it into a specific folder without having to go back to that home dashboard. The premium feature that they are starting to include are alerts when students change answers on a formative. So it notifies you and you can see answers that have been changed so that you don't have to go back and look through all of that. They are adding some new social studies assessments. So they've got a couple of new social studies curriculums that they're having some preset questions and all that for. So if you're a social studies teacher, that's definitely something that you might want to check out. Another thing that they're adding is Google image search. So you can add images into your questions, into text blocks, or you can use them as backgrounds for show your work questions. So say something like a math question that involves a graph, you could use a Google image search to add graph paper as the background on a show your work question to make it a little bit easier on students. Also, the rich text format will now automatically add links. So if you type in a .com kind of address, it will automatically link that to that website. And finally, you can link Formative to existing Google Classrooms. So if you have a Google Classroom set up, you can link that together without having to add all those individual students. Some Flipgrid updates for you. Flipgrid now allows you to sync your Google Classroom rosters, again, making it a little bit easier to connect Google and Flipgrid together. They have just implemented a mic-only mode, which will turn off the camera and just allow students to record through their microphone, which is a great thing for some of those students that don't want to be on screen. I know that's one of the things that I've had. A lot of students don't mind talking, but they don't necessarily want to be recorded on the video part of it. So having that mic-only mode will be helpful for getting those students more involved. In recording shorts, you can add titles and search through the shorts library. And also there's new tools to be able to quickly copy links to those shorts videos. So just another thing to make it a little bit more convenient, a little bit more easy to navigate through all of those videos. Also, now you can batch actions from student lists, so you can select multiple students at a time and complete the same actions for all of those at once rather than having to go through individual students and do all of that. They're also implementing timestamps in videos in the comments, so you can timestamp different sections of the video to make it a little bit easier to find some stuff. And finally, for the selfies that you take for those videos, they have a name tag option now where students can create a name tag to put on the cover, which would, make it pretty easy from the teacher side of it to easily see which videos belong to which students, because, sometimes they'll take pictures that are not actually of them, and so you don't know on the picture who it actually is. So having that name tag option would be a really helpful way to navigate through some of those videos. PairDeck is now offering a shared teacher dashboard option, which is kind of a cool thing. And obviously this is for premium accounts, but what you can do if you have used PairDeck premium, there's a teacher dashboard where you can follow along and see kind of the live feedback and insights from students. You're now going to be able to share that with other teachers. So you can share session controls and student insights with other educators. So if you have a co-teacher maybe in your classroom or something like that, you can share that teacher dashboard with them and add them to it so that they're able to access that as well. And it gives them access to everything that you have. They can add quick poll questions. They can see student feedback. They can navigate the slideshow. So everything that you can do from your teacher dashboard, they're going to be able to do as well, which is a pretty cool option, especially, like I said, for classrooms that have multiple teachers in them. Giving them access to that will be a great thing. So a little Microsoft news. Yes, Microsoft. I know I talk a lot about Google, but I am trying to keep up with some Microsoft news as well. If you don't know, Microsoft Office 365 education is free to eligible students and teachers. And so mostly you just have to have a education email address, and you can go sign up to get a free version of Office 365 education. So check the show notes for a link to that to see if you are eligible to get that free stuff. In some Google news, Google Meet settings now have sticky options for education users. And basically, some of you may have kind of seen this already if you're using Google Meet. But if you change some of the options, like the ability for students to share their screen or make comments, some of those that as you change it, it will update settings for that. So if you're using, say, the Google Meet for a Google Classroom and you turn off the option for students to share a screen, it will be sticky. In other words, the next time you start that session again, that option will be turned off. So it's using some of that learning to make things a little bit easier for teachers so you don't have to keep turning options on and off. Also, Google is improving search in Google Drive for Android and iOS devices. So you'll be able to have some of the recent searches will pop up, as well as a few other options to make it a little bit easier to search Google Drive on your Google or Android or iOS devices. And finally, the big news for me, the thing that I love, the new news is a Google Docs update. So if you have ever used Google Docs, you have to set it, the page dimensions to the same thing. Google is now updating the ability to create and work with documents that contain multiple page orientations. And so what this means is, say you've got a Google Doc and you've got it in that standard portrait 8.5 by 11 size, but you have a chart that's really wide. Previously, that chart would kind of get cut off, or it would look weird. But now you'll be able to create another page for that chart with maybe the landscape view, and so the wider chart will be available and you can see it like it should be. So that's really cool. I'm really excited about that. I know several times I've tried to add charts to Google Docs and then had to really work with the dimensions and it was just messy. So that's a really cool feature coming up for Google Docs. Well, that's a lot of news and updates, but that will take care of that segment. So let's go ahead and pop open the treasure chest and see what we have in there today. All right, so my treasure chest today is another website. This is one that I have been using a ton, and I just wanted to mention it real quick because it has been super helpful, and that is Canva for Educators. So if you don't know what Canva is basically it's a design site that gives you templates to create graphics and infographics and all that kind of stuff. Canva offers a education account for teachers. And so you can take a look in the show notes. I'll have a link to that. You can sign up for an educator account and apply for it, and they'll double check to make sure that it's valid. But it opens you up and gives you access to a lot more than what you get on the free version of it. So you get a little bit of the premium features. It's not the full premium version of Canva, but it does open you up to a lot more templates and a lot more things that you can use. But it also opens up the ability to create classes in there. So if you are doing things with your students where you're having them design stuff, you can create classes in there and add them to it and send invites to them. And they'll be able to use a lot of those templates and stuff from Canvas, which makes, their workload a little bit easier there as well. They're not having to create things completely from scratch. So definitely check out Canva for Educators. Check the show notes for the link to that page. Well, that will take care of this intro segment. So up next, the boss battle is coming up, and you're going to flip for flipped classes. I'm sorry for that terrible pun. So today's boss battle is taking a look at the idea of flipped classrooms and blended learning environments, especially this year with a lot of the virtual learning going on, with hybrid models, lots of different types of class structures now. We don't have that traditional setting, but I also just wanted to take a look and share some thoughts and ideas and things that I have gained in the last couple of years with my experimentation with these ideas and ways that I have changed up some stuff in my classroom. So the first thing I would kind of look at is, why do this? Why even bother trying to do something like a flipped classroom or a blended learning environment? And for me, it came down to things that I observed a lot in my class. And a lot of you are probably the same way if you've noticed some of these things. So when I would do some kind of traditional lesson where I was, standing up in front of the class, giving a bunch of information, expecting them to take notes, expecting them to listen, and a lot of that, what we call teacher-centered kind of instruction, I noticed, one, the engagement, it wasn't there. But also just my different types of students and the way that they responded. So I noticed that a lot of my higher level students were just bored with class. They already knew a lot of that information. It was really, to be honest, it was a waste of their time. And subsequently, it was a waste of my time because I wasn't doing my job. I wasn't teaching them. I wasn't helping them learn. On the inverse of that, my struggling students often got lost, and so they would just give up. If they weren't following along with what I was saying because they maybe didn't have that background knowledge or the foundational knowledge that they needed. And if you're listening to some kind of lecture on something and you have no clue what it's about, then you're tuning out in 30 seconds. And so really what that left me was kind of that middle group that was the only group that was really benefiting. And so I started to look at, what can I do to try to make better use of that time and better use of the classroom environment? So some of the benefits that I have noticed in the last couple of years with kind of flipping my classroom and doing some of this blended learning is, one, it gives me a lot more one-on-one time with my students. Since I'm not up in front of the classroom trying to speak to 25, 30 students at a time, I'm able to have more one-on-one conversations with them, which then allows me to kind of assess them individually and help them wherever they're at. And the other thing that has been super beneficial is by doing this, it allows more classroom time for applying their learning in practical ways. And so I'm going to be kind of talking about that and looking at some examples and ways this stuff can be done in lots of different content areas. Another great benefit to these flipped classroom lessons is, since a lot of them are video based, it gives students the ability to pause, to rewind, to rewatch if they miss something. So, if they zone out for a couple of minutes, they didn't miss the information. They can just rewind and start back from where they left off. Or if they watch a section and they're still very confused, then they can go back and watch it again and find those places where they may have missed some information. And so it gives them a little bit more control over their learning. It allows them to post questions to you to give you feedback about what they understand. And also, with it being self-paced, it gives them a lot more autonomy in their learning. So students who are maybe struggling, it gives them time to slow down and work at their own pace to make sure that they're learning and understanding. If you've got higher level students, it gives them time to work ahead so that they're not just sitting around waiting for something else to do. Again, it's maximizing that usage of time in your classroom to help them progress from wherever they are. So some examples of what this might look like is in different content groups. And these are just some ideas that I've come up with for different content areas. I'm sure those of you in some of these content areas, especially if you've already done some of this stuff, have even better ideas than what I've come up with. So in something like a science class, maybe you put direct instruction on a video where you're explaining some of the terminology and some of the ideas and theories behind some of this stuff. And then you spend class time working on labs where they are, practically applying some of those theories or some of those ideas. And that allows you to use some inquiry-based learning with students. You can give them a problem to solve, and then they can use the videos that you recorded to work on solving those problems. In math, when I was growing up taking math classes, it was a lot of the same kind of stuff. You would have the teacher would spend 10, 15, 20 minutes working some problems and examples on the screen or the board or, whatever it is in the time period that you were in school. So you copy down those examples and the ideas, and then you spent time working on other problems. So instead of taking class time to do that, maybe in a math class, you could record a video where you're going over some of those problems, explaining how to do it for students to watch on their own time. And then that frees you up to allow them to apply those ideas a lot more in class and gives you time to, again, work a lot more one-on-one with them as they're doing that. Maybe you spend class time giving them some real world scenarios where they're learning how to apply some of those ideas that you talked about and giving them time in class to work together to do that. In an ELA class, and this is my area, this is what I've done. And so I'll do something like create videos for mechanics or some writing ideas or reading strategies or anything like that would be the instruction. And then I get them involved with creating stuff in class. So they do the writing, they do the projects and all that in class. In an art class, it could be something as simple as videos about certain techniques and tools used for art. And then again, students take that time to create in class. Social studies and history classes, you could have videos about concepts, about overviews, about the informational part of history and social studies, and then use class time for dialogue and instructions and looking at actual documents and even some of those like what if scenarios. What if this moment in history had been done a little bit differently, to get them into that deeper thinking. Even like a PE class, I always like to try to keep the PE teachers in mind when I'm going over these ideas and these concepts. What would a flipped classroom look like in a weightlifting class or a PE class? And maybe you have instructional videos on, rules for games or techniques for lifting, and then have them actually apply that kind of stuff in class. So essentially what I do, I kind of ask myself this question: what is it that students do not need me for? What is it that they do need me for? And so what I want to do is I want to take anything that they don't need me for, and I want them to do that maybe outside of class or on their own time. What they do need me for, I want them to be in class where I can help guide them. And so what that ends up a lot of times being is what they are doing in my class is creating. What they are doing outside of my class is taking in information. And so, in my English class, what we used to do is we used to do all the writing outside of class, and we would spend time in class getting the instruction. But think about a student who doesn't really know what to write about. If I have a student who's at home working on a writing assignment and doesn't even know how to get started, then they're not getting anything done. But if they're in my class and I'm walking around and checking in on them as they're creating something, I can see that this student is struggling, needs help, and I can prompt that student to get them started, which is going to help them make a better use of their time. So that's the question I ask is, what do they need me for in class? I focus on them working on creating in my class, and then they can take in information outside of class or continue working on something outside of class if they need to, with a good idea of what they're doing. Now, that being said, a flipped classroom, a hybrid model, blended learning, that's definitely not a magic bullet. It's not going to be 100% effective. Nothing ever really is when it comes to education and when it comes to people. So it's not like it's going to magically fix all of your issues, but it does help. And I found a lot of common obstacles and common hurdles that teachers will encounter as they do this. So, a few things just to look at and some troubleshooting for that. One of the biggest hurdles is definitely going to be access. So what do you do about your students who maybe don't have internet access outside of school? What do you do with those students? And there's some workarounds. There are some options out there. One, a lot of students may not have laptops or computers, but more of them do have phones that can access internet. And while, data does cost, a lot of them do have access to it in that way. And a lot of the apps that you can use for Flipped Classroom do have mobile app versions of it that can easily allow students to get on that. So something like Ed Puzzle, which I'll talk about a little bit later, they have an app, and I always tell mine, I've got a 5-minute video I want you to watch and do. That's something that you can do on the bus ride home. Now, they typically aren't going to do that, but they do have the time. They do have the option to do that. Another option is you can set aside time in your class for them to be able to do that kind of stuff. So a lot of times I will have 5 or 10 minutes in class where I want them to maybe watch some of the videos and have that taken care of while they're in class, and then I can follow up with them as they're doing that. And then, of course, you got before and after school as an option. But, even if that workaround is not possible, think about even maybe print ways you can do that. So, I might have a video of me explaining something for the students that have access to it. If I've got somebody that just completely doesn't have access, is not able to come before or after school or anything like that, I could always probably find an article or, print something out for that student to read and look through. And again, it's not ideal, but then I will take time to work with those students in class too, just to make sure that they understand those ideas and concepts. All right, some other common hurdles. One with video, video length can definitely be an issue depending on what you teach and what grade level you're at and all that. So a couple of tips for video length issues. One, the recommendation, if you kind of look online and do some research, is essentially 1 to 1.5 minutes per grade level max. So if I take something like my 9th, 10th grade class, what we're looking at there is roughly 10 to 15 minutes for those students. Now, again, even if you teach high school, you probably know that you've got some students who are not going to pay attention more than 5 minutes or so. And that's where, knowing your students, knowing your groupings, knowing your classes is also very helpful. So, keep that in mind, taking into account what they're going to be able to watch, and then break up videos. So maybe I have a 30-minute video that I want them to watch. Instead of trying to put it into a whole 30-minute section, there are a lot of tools out there. I can take it and break it up into 3 or 4 smaller 5 to 10-minute videos. So keep those in mind as you're looking at something like a video lesson. Another great hurdle, this one's definitely going to be one of the obvious ones is, well, what if they didn't watch it? What if they didn't watch a video? So my response to that is typically kind of the same thing. All right, so what if they didn't watch a video that they were supposed to watch at home? Well, what if they didn't do the homework that you asked them to do? What if they didn't listen to the lecture that you gave in class? What if they didn't do X, Y, Z? And so part of my response to that is, what do you do for students who don't do in your class? And it's going to be something similar. So you treat it like you would a homework assignment or a note-taking session or, whatever it is that you're doing in class. Do what you need to do to hold them accountable. And there are different measures that you can do, different apps that you can use, different tools you can do, things that you can do in class to keep that accountability there for them, which I will talk about a little bit later when I get to some of the tech tools that you can use for flipped classroom. And then the last thing is time, right? What about your time as a teacher? If I'm already swamped, if I'm busy planning lessons and grading stuff and teaching in class and all that, well, where am I going to find time to create videos? And, the simple solution is don't reinvent the wheel. If you don't have time to create your own videos, then use videos that are already created. There's tons of stuff out there on YouTube, on Khan Academy, on, all these different educational sites that have information readily available. Yeah, maybe it's not going to be 100% exactly like you want it to be presented, but that is a time-saving effort. If you do have time, you can, take that information and then you can create your own videos. And there's, again, lots of some great tools out there that you can use to put all of that stuff together. All right, so now that we've talked about the why, let's take a look real quick at the how. So I just want to go over some different tech tools that can get you started on this. And my list here is definitely not an exhaustive list. These are a lot of my personal favorites, the ones that I use a lot in class, as well as, I'll mention some other ones that are similar to that. But the first one is one of my go-tos is Edpuzzle. And Edpuzzle, if you don't know, essentially is it gives you the ability to add multiple choice and written responses questions to videos. And so as an accountability measure, that is one way of making sure that students are watching what you are telling them to watch, because they're answering questions. You can see the stats. You can see how much of the video that they watched, how many times that they watched different segments, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just a good instructional thing. It's also a good way to get feedback and assess what students do understand and be able to follow up in class. And so again, some highlights for Edpuzzle. It does allow students to move at their own pace. You can set it so that they cannot skip ahead, which ensures that they are at least playing the entire video. It gives some of that accountability because they are answering, multiple choice questions. They're answering short answer kinds of responses, and it gives you information to know if they actually watched it or not. And it allows you to see 100% participation. So you can see students who did not even start it, and you can follow up with them and make sure that they're getting that taken care of. There are a lot of ways that you can use Edpuzzle. You can use it for stations in class. You can use it for individual work. You can use it to test listening skills. For at-home use, you can use it to add to lessons you've done in class, for demonstrations, introductions to new units coming up, have them watch something to prepare for a discussion the following day in class. You can use it as a review opportunity for, unit concepts, for exam study guides and all of that. So it's a really great, really versatile tool. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't have time, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If once you get connected, you connect it to other teachers in your school. And so you can use other videos that other teachers have already done. So maybe you're on a team with a group, and y'all can even split video sessions up and then use that across all of your classes. You can upload any of your own videos that you recorded, but then also there's a search. So YouTube is integrated into it, Khan Academy, the Nat Geo, TED Talks. There's a lot of different websites that are integrated into Edpuzzle to give you a lot of stuff to choose from. The next tool is Screencastify. Screencastify is just a Google extension that allows you to record videos from your webcam, as well as doing screencasts of your browser or even your desktop. So it allows you to, you can do walkthroughs and tutorials while actually showing that kind of stuff. Screencastify is one that I use a lot. It's really easy to get into. There are other types of programs out there that do similar things. I know Loom is one that is very, very much used by a lot of educators as well. Screencastify is just one that I typically go with. And again, it records easy. It saves it right into your Google Drive. You can upload it to YouTube from there, to Edpuzzle and all that kind of stuff. So Screencastify is a really great program to use for flipped lessons. Another one of my go-to sites is Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a site that allows students to upload videos to a grid where they can watch each other. So it can be good for discussions. You can create your own videos to upload to it that students can watch to maybe show them an example of what you're looking for. They put the code in, they record their video. There's a lot of, things that they can do with it. A lot of, kind of like whistles and bells to make it interesting. It does a lot of, they've integrated a lot of stuff at Flipgrid that is similar to a lot of things that students do on some of their different social media apps. So they can add emojis and filters and all that kind of stuff to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. But it is a good way to have students give verbal explanations of things. And they also have a new screencasting ability as well. Now, another tool that you may not initially kind of think about when you think flipped classroom hybrid model is Google Forms. And Google Forms is another way that you can get feedback from students and still be able to understand if they have gotten the information. And so one of the things that you could easily do is Google Forms allows you to embed videos. So you can take a video from YouTube, you can embed it into a Google form for them to watch, and then you can add questions and response materials similar to what you might be able to do with an ed puzzle. But then Google Forms has, different types of questions that you ask. So you're not limited to multiple choice written response. You can use some of the other question types that are in Google Forms. Also, with it being Google Forms, it's all integrated right into your Google account. You have the Google Sheets that you'll get the responses for, so you can look at that information to follow up with at a later time. And then the last tool that I want to take a look at today is Pear Deck. Pear Deck allows you to basically take a PowerPoint presentation or a Google Slides presentation and add interactive responses to it. So I can create a Google Slides presentation. I can add any videos, any information, any images, anything that I want students to be able to see, to read, and interact with. But then you create response slides with Pear Deck. So I can create a multiple choice response. I can create a written response, or, they've got drawing slides. They've got, all kinds of different ways that students can interact with the information, so that it's not just them clicking through slides. So you can have them do some practical application on it. Again, if they're doing that outside of class, then you can take a look at it and follow up with it the next day, or, whenever. And they also, they have the student paced mode. So, if you assign something for them to do at home, you click it onto student paced mode, and then they can go through it at their own pace, and then, follow up with that later on. So one last thought that I've had with the idea of flipping a classroom too is, what if we flipped the instructor? So all of this stuff has been us approaching things from we as teachers creating lessons for outside of class for students to watch and answer. What if we flipped it and instead our students were the ones who were creating the lessons and the content? And so, again, we could take all of those tools and then just flip it onto our students. There's a lot of research out there that talks about how if students are creating good quiz questions or good content to teach someone else, that helps them learn more than others. So, instead of me recording a screencastify where I create a Google slide presentation and then record a screencast of me talking about that information, what if students did that instead? They looked up the information. They created the Google slides. They recorded the lesson and then sent it to you. Same thing with something like a quiz. I've had students do their own quizzes game where I gave them a topic or a content area and had them create 5 to 10 questions about that, giving them parameters for the different levels of content so that you're actually getting good quality questions. And then again, you can do that while they are, working in class, and talk with them and work with them individually. So to really sum this up, the whole idea of flipping your class is really taking that teacher focused, standing in front of the students, giving them information, and flipping it in a way that has them interacting with the information a lot more on their own. Whether it's them creating content, whether it's them doing something outside of class and then creating their own applications of it in class, it helps to give them some of that deeper thinking, some of that deeper interaction with the concepts, so that you're not just spending time giving a lot of information and focusing on the recall. It actually helps you focus a lot more on the application aspect of it. So if you have not tried doing some flipped class stuff, I highly recommend it. And I would just suggest take a lesson that you already have done and then just figure out a way that you can redesign it into a blended learning fashion. So that lecture that you were going to give to class, what if you just took it and recorded it for students to do outside of class and then have some kind of application follow up with it the next day? So hopefully that gives you some good ideas of things that you can do. Hopefully that will help you kind of level up what's going on in your classroom. And hopefully you've got some ideas that you can share with the rest of the 8-Bit community. So up next, we will have the 8-Bit Crew Community Board and Question of the Week. All right, so for this week's question of the week, I don't have a question that is necessarily related to the boss battle from today, but it is the end of the semester. We are heading into a short break. I know my school system is finishing up this week and we have 2 weeks off, so breaks are a great time to rest and relax and recharge. And so what I really would like to know is, what are some of your favorite ways to recharge between semesters or when you have breaks from school? I know some of my favorite things. I love reading, so my goal for every break is always to read. So, a week off at Thanksgiving, my goal is to finish a whole book, or, over Christmas break, 2 weeks, I want to at least finish a whole book. I don't always do it, but that is the goal. I also really enjoy writing. I write a lot of fiction and all that, so I'll be working on that some over Christmas break as well. And then sometimes I just like going for walks. It's just nice to get out and get away from stuff and just walk. So those are some of mine. Let me know what you have going on for yours. On the subject of taking a break and recharging, this will be the last episode for a couple of weeks. I'm going to take some time over Christmas break just to try to recharge and recover from this semester. So for the next couple of weeks, I will not release a new episode. I will be back on January 7th, though, and I have a special guest lined up for that episode. Misbah Gadal from Wakelet joins me to talk a little bit about that platform. So make sure you tune in for that episode. Well, that will wrap up this episode. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Happy end of 2020. I hope you guys have a wonderful break and a happy new year. And I will see you again in 2021. Until then, may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ComicSocks and use the hashtag 8BitCrew. See you next week. On your webcam, you can also do screen